Well, if it's not too much trouble, if you guys don't already know, by all the advertising I've done, one of the things that has fascinated me the most about you is what this man has his PhD in, and I would love if you would, although it's probably part of your talk, but if you could talk a little bit about how you ended up with your PhD in sound design, correct?
Sure. Well, it's a film sound history, theory, and practice, but sound design's good enough.
That's amazing. So I'm going to listen from the back, but I think that's very interesting to find out, and that kind of will be the sound.
It's our first question.
Perfect. If you guys don't mind, and I hope I'm not stepping on your presentation, but
no, I'd be happy to share about
yeah,
that.
I'd love to hear that as I'm making teas.
Okay, so I have to speak really loudly? Okay.
Well, fairly loud.
All right, so how did that happen? Okay, I have a lot of friends that are in the film business, and I learned through them I don't want to be an actor. I'm not good enough to be a director. Screenwriting sounds like it's a whole other species of animal that's not even close to what I am. And I thought, what have I always loved, which we'll get into later? Sound. And sound as a device for storytelling. Because that's what sound design... I probably have to explain. Sound design is different than sound editing or sound mixing. Let's see, how much do I want to get into this? Okay, so it was originally set up as a different credit when Coppola was working with Walter Murch on The Conversation. God rest Gene Hackman. And he wanted to work from production to post-production. And the guild or the editors union wouldn't allow any of these guys to work up front. So they decided they were going to invent a whole new title, whole new designation, so he could work through the whole thing. And then later that kind of got really elaborate with Apocalypse Now. So that's how sound design started, with someone who's going to design the soundtrack, apart from the music, from beginning to end. So it's sort of enhancing the image through storytelling audibly. Question?
Yeah, so you made a distinction between the soundtrack versus the music. So I'd like to understand that relationship.
Sound versus music. The soundtrack is everything.
Yeah.
So soundtrack would be dialogue, music,
okay. All right.
and sound effects. So I'm strictly the person that would generate the sound effects, edit the sound effects, mix the sound effects, so they work with the composer's music. And then I would also probably be the guy that cleans up all the dialogue and make sure that it is audible and clear and doesn't have all that noise in it and all that stuff.
Got it. Yeah.
But mainly my job is to make noises and to create unique, because obviously you can't shoot someone in a movie. Not supposed to.
Yeah.
They did that once in The Crow by accident, which is horrible. If you know about that story.
Who was in The Crow?
It was Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee.
Oh, yeah.
They thought there was an empty, like a blank in the chamber, but there wasn't. They actually shot him.
Yes. That's like
But that had nothing to do with the sound.
What is it, gumbo and grilled cheese?
But generally, yeah, I'm the guy that
Did
would...
you have gumbo and grilled cheese?
Sure it is. Oh, not grilled cheese.
Just
Not grilled
sourdough?
cheese.
Yeah.
So I'd be the guy that would generate all that. And so for my PhD, my idea was that since sound is generally the poor cousin to image, even in the way that we talk about film, we talk about I saw a movie, when clearly since 1929 or 27, it's an audio-visual experience. It was the fastest revolution in filmmaking ever when we went from silent to sound. I could talk to you about that for years if you want. But anyway, we don't even talk about it that way. So, and quite often these guys that are on my side of things are shoved into the end of the movie where it's already shot, it's already edited, and we're an afterthought. And it's such an essential part to the storytelling process. I use the Coen brothers mainly their work on Raising Arizona and Barton Fink, to sort of say how they brought their guy in from the very beginning. They gave him the script. He was already taking notes on the script. He was planning ideas. He was discussing it with Carter Burwell, the composer, and all those things from the very beginning. He was talking to Joel and Ethan about it. And so I thought, why isn't that the model? It's so essential. So it was trying to prioritize sound so that it's more of a thing that filmmakers don't leave to the end, because it's so vital. And so that was basically the gist of my PhD. So I talked about a lot of the theory involved with sound creation and how important it is, the historical ideas of how it's been marginalized, and then how practice in this way would make most films a better product. And not that they're bad products, but I think better in terms of a sound and image idea. And to get filmmakers to think more about the value of sound itself. Because most of the guys you talk to, directors, I don't know if anybody here is one, they think about image. They might think about music. They seem to be, it's easy to relate to music. It's very emotional. It's also, most people listen to music. But sound is very abstract. But it can be used in very musical ways, or in a similar way that music can be used. So I used a lot of my PhD to try to educate filmmakers in that way. I've been told, because I interviewed Skip Lebsey, their main sound designer, or Joel and Ethan's main guy. They've had him on every movie. They've given him a top credit, meaning before the film, not at the end in the scroll. So to show, hey, sound's important to us. And so I got to interview him twice, and supposedly he let Joel and Ethan see it. I never got to meet them, unfortunately. But I think I got the thumbs up from them. That's about it. Now I'm going to forget the other guy's name. My only claim to fame with that is Skip was working on The New World with Terrence Malick. And Terrence Malick saw my PhD. And he said one word, which is very nice. At least he said something. He said, impressive. I don't know if he just thought because it's really long. I doubt he read it. But anyway, I appreciate that from Terrence Malick.
Yeah.
So that's it. I don't know if you got that. But any questions about that?
No, that's super interesting.
As an introduction, I'm going to read the first paragraph from Randy's book, and then we're going to get into Randy's talk as a sort of introduction from his book, MOME. MOME. A rustling, crackling resonated beside him. Caleb tried to take no notice of it. All he wanted to do was have a nice, peaceful rest, to get away from the roughs and skags for a while, to get some air. He always chose this alleyway for that very reason. It was usually quiet and relaxing. The alleyway had tall, steel-framed walls on all three sides, and the closest residential sector was at least a kilometer away. There was something about its older architectural style that made me feel at ease. There was something safe and clean about it. The shiny, silvery wall to the north would gleam in the sunlight, and he would stare at it from the shade of the south. He'd sit there watching the changing line of shadow as it slowly stretched its way upward. It was alive to him. It had some creaturely quality that gave him comfort, like there was something out there watching over him. He was also sure that he was the only one who noticed it. That's the beginning of Randy's book. Now, Randy...
I'm Randall.
I'm sorry.
I'm Randall today.
Randall.
Steve has known me for so long.
Sometimes referred to as Sound or Dr. Sound. Who is Randall Sound?
Who is Randall Sound? I don't know that.
Who is Randy Barnes?
Randall Barnes? Let's see, how should I answer that? Well, I guess I want to say that I'm a guy who's very, very, very much interested in creativity and imagination. I like the creative fringes. To a certain extent, of creativity and imagination, and I think that probably started when I was really, really young. If I can remember, I was probably, my mom at least tells me I was about 2, and she gave me Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, and that started my journey into imagination. Everyone's familiar with that book, right?
Yeah.
About the little boy, probably similar to me as a wild child, who then imagines this place where the scary monsters are. And I think, and then he eventually makes his way back. But that probably grabbed my imagination, and I started from there. And I started writing as an very early. I don't know what I wrote, I can't remember. I just know that my mom probably wanted to channel some of my wildness into something productive. We'll get him to College of the Canyons, summer course. I was 10 years old, so it must not have been an adult course. Give him some creative writing stuff to do. I did that, that was fun.
You actually were a wild child.
I was very
A troubled young man.
I caused trouble.
Caused trouble.
I did not
But not trouble.
I probably was trouble.
Caused trouble.
I caused a lot of trouble.
Trouble for others.
I hated authority. No, I didn't respect authority. I tended to open my mouth when I should have closed it. I tended to be extremely principled and idealistic and said, well, this is, I didn't do this. Why am I responsible for this? And I'd have arguments with my teachers, eventually get to the principal, get suspended.
You were asked to leave quite a few times.
Quite a few times. They let me.
Telling on you.
Well, that's why I brought him here. Thank you, Steve. I think they let me slide through my senior year of high school, and I think it was just we want to get him out, and so they didn't suspend me that year or kick me out. But to go back to what I was saying,
Yes.
I started dabbling in what I guess you could call poetry. As a pretentious, idealistic young man, writing pretty much like taking words and throwing it at a page. You might be able to call it streams of consciousness, but it probably was just me being pretentious. So I did a bunch of that, and then to be even more pretentious, I wrote this extremely detailed but novel, let's call it, when I was in high school. And to show you how pretentious it was, I called it Chapters Dressed in Phantasmagoria.
I
You like that?
Yeah.
But this is a 16-year-old person writing that. So, and it was all an allegory from beginning to end of someone's life. So from birth, death, and even beyond death. It was this whole thing. I think I've buried it for good, and I will never see it ever again. Maybe one day.
Well, what is MOME about, this book?
MOME? Okay.
How would you describe this book?
How would I describe? It's a science fiction book. It's a science fiction mystery book. How would I describe it? Well, if I go for the simple, easy answer, it's about a discovery of an anomaly that unleashes corruption, murder, and chaos. That's my tagline, so it's easy to say. But it's kind of, I would say it's 3 parallel storylines that eventually converge. The first storyline is 2 physicists that make the discovery of the anomaly, which then leads them into this big revolutionary discovery that has an impact unbeknownst to them and sort of beknownst to them on things around them and people around them. Then there's the next level or plot line is a series of murders that are connected to this anomaly or the discovery of the anomaly. And then the third level or layer is a boy who's using some untested, I don't know what, I call it betaware, so it's sort of like a headset that allows him to interface with, let's call it the cyberspace. So through the anomaly, he gets trapped into cyberspace And all of these storylines eventually, as I said, converge. But underneath them all is this, I guess, this sinister underbelly that relates to, let's see, I don't know how much do I want to divulge. Let's just say there's this physics labs, there's businesses that sponsor these physics labs, and some of them are not really interested in being very altruistic. In fact, maybe the polar opposite. They see the power this anomaly will create, and they want to exploit it to probably the absolute length of it.
It's science fiction.
Science fiction. Yeah, it's in the near future. I don't give you a specific date, but I would probably say 30 to 50 years from now is possible.
But it's an entertaining. It's an entertaining book. I read the book, and it's an entertaining. It's disturbing. There's an element of danger to it.
Definitely on
but it's an entertaining book. So it brings me to the question of the difference between hard science fiction and entertaining science fiction, or
not hard.
not hard science fiction.
Well, I mean,
not hard, or an example of, and please give us an example.
Hard science fiction. Is everyone familiar with that? You may like Arthur C. Clarke is usually put in hard science. Carl Sagan's fiction.
What about Octavia? How would you classify Octavia Butler, who I love? That was almost prescient.
Kind of walking the line. Yeah, because for me, it has to have a compatibility, where when you're reading hard science fiction, you can see what we have today is totally compatible with what's coming in the book or the movie or the TV show. There's a logical consistency. It's rational. And it definitely is based on the science we have now, and it's easy to see. It's not obfuscated or hidden. Where I don't know if I can classify all other science fiction, but anything that's not hard doesn't keep itself just to that. It doesn't, I guess, care if it's compatible. It doesn't care as much how realistic these new devices or these new discoveries match up perfectly or match up logically and rationally to things in the future. It can play with that and allow you to kind of explore it more imaginatively. So it's a much looser approach. And I think there's elements of my book where you might say it's very hard, as in hard science fiction, not hard in other ways. Mainly with the physicists discover. And there's moments I have a doctor who has to deal with one of the, I'll say, the effects of this anomaly. He occasionally gets a little medical. But most of mine is imaginative and doesn't really get into the harder stuff. I try to, again, I go back to my love of creativity and imagination. I'm trying to explore things that are plausible, but I don't care if they're compatible. It's just, for me, it's a bit of fun. And hopefully everyone else sees it's a bit of fun.
It's also obviously a person it's written by a person who's in love with language, culture, words,
definitely.
Vocabulary.
Vocabulary, definitely.
Can you expound on that?
Well, I guess before I got my PhD in film sound, I got an MA in linguistics. I get bored very easily. I change things. So I was an English language teacher for, I don't know, I'll say 25 years. So I think at some point I needed to get an MA, but it's, we don't need to talk about that. Anyway, but that comes from such a love of vocabulary and language and communication. Where did that all start? The Beatles.
Yeah. You mentioned Yellow Submarine.
I did mention that to you, yes. There is, I'm sure, hopefully most people, I don't have to explain that. But I'm talking about the album, not the movie, and not the song. So when I was really young, probably 5 or 6 years old, my neighbor, who was much older than me, gave me the Yellow Submarine album. And at that time, I had never heard the Beatles. I didn't know anything about them. But I guess in my little brain, I was able to perceive that these guys are from somewhere else. They have an accent. They're different. And then later I learned, they're English. So as a 5 or 6 year old, it fascinated me. They're speaking in English, but it's a different place. It's a different culture. And that is probably where I started my whole journey into language. But the whole idea that you can communicate, like I'm up here saying words, you actually are hearing my words, and instantaneously you can hopefully understand what I'm saying, process it, and maybe think of 1 billion replies you can give back to me. That's just miraculous. It's amazing. But think about it on a level where you're communicating in foreign languages and other cultures. So for me, that's kind of foundational to what builds society. I guess because when if you look at Tolkien's work and other people like, William Gibson's early science fiction, I would throw in, if you know Jeff Noon's book, Vert, and some other early writings of his. They invent language. Tolkien, we probably know, invented a whole language first, and then built a story around it. I didn't do that, I promise you. But I tried. I thought, this is a way you're immediately immersed in this other place. You immediately know, this is not my home. This is somewhere else. And it's someplace else in some time else. So with my book, I wanted to immediately immerse you into another place and time. So yes, I invented many words, and I incorporated a lot of slang to kind of let you know, this is a different place. This is the future. And hopefully, I think I've planted enough contextual clues or cues to not get you lost in it all, so that you're like, okay, I understand what he's saying here. You may have heard, for example, when he read the word skag was at the beginning of that.
Yes, skag.
Hopefully you know that from the context you may or may not have understood. A skag is is a criminal or a bad guy.
Mullet brain.
Oh, we got more words now. I do have, mullet brain was one fun one. It's just a really, intense way of saying you're an idiot.
That brings me to the definition of MOME.
Oh, MOME. Okay. You're probably wondering why I titled it MOME. I was wondering that too for a very long time. Okay, the original idea, I will admit, was that one of the first books I ever fell in love with, or set of books, since there's 2 of them, are Alice in Wonderland, or Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, 2 books. And in the second one, Through the Looking Glass, you may or may not know about Jabberwocky. So, 'twas brilliant with a slightly towed the garrow, gimbled in the wave, all mimsy, where the borogoves and the MOME rest out great. So, I thought it was this nonsense word. I could play with it, which again goes back to what I was saying about playing with words and manipulating them. And I eventually found it and grounded it into something very real in the book. I'm trying not to reveal everything that it is because it comes very late in the book and it's pivotal, crucial, and I don't want to give that away. But I'll say that a friend of mine on Facebook asked me several times what the title meant, and I tried to explain it to the way that I just said to you guys, and he looked it up. And unbeknownst to me, there actually is a real word, MOME. It's from Middle English, so 40, and it means idiot or fool,
Like mullet brain.
like mullet brain, but not as intense. I could still work. It still works in there somehow, but hopefully no one's delving into Middle English and reading my book. So,
Gronk.
Gronk, Gronk is part of my hacker slang. There's a whole subculture of hackers in my book, and Gronk. Let's see, how should I explain it? It basically means to make something not very intelligent. So and ultimately so it doesn't work. It comes from the beatniks, and then later when they may or may have got it from
the beatniks. It was borrowed by BC by the beat. From
do you know BC, the comic strip BC? Yeah. It was from there, and then the hackers picked it up.
That's right, it was in there.
And that's where that came.
I think Maynard G. Krebs used the word.
He might have.
Dobie
Couldn't put past
Dobie Gillens.
Yes.
Any more words for you?
Well, we have Bam Pot.
Bam Pot. So I have a Scottish character named Alistair McCarrick, and he doesn't use an awful lot of slang, but occasionally I throw him in there. So that's Scottish slang for like an eccentric or crazy person or idea is a Bam Pot.
So the culture words creating society.
I think it creates society, and again, the whole world-building idea that I tried to incorporate in this comes from, I would say at least 50% is the language. And then there's the devices, and then the other elements that all make it futuristic. But a lot of it is the language, so, because you can tell how language today is very different than the language we used maybe in the 1950s, or if you want to go back even further, 100 years, radically different. And then even the way some of the words have changed meaning or been accepted or they've been tampered down. So it's kind of, I thought that's a way you can show a culture, you can show a world. And that's what I hoped I could kind of not just gently, but sort of push people directly into.
It's a very disturbing. There's a lot of it's an entertaining book, but it's
Hopefully it's entertaining.
it's a smart book. It's a challenging book.
It's challenging?
It's a challenging book.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
It's
You
a
said
challenging.
You said a bad word.
I mean, it's your first 10 pages.
It's a challenging. It's a challenging book.
Challenging in what way?
Challenging in what ways?
I found myself having to immerse myself totally into the characters and into the language of the book, and then it sort of released itself and started to reveal itself.
If you want to call it, there's 3 parallel storylines. I personally don't think they're that complex. In fact, the story plot lines are probably easier to follow than maybe some of the vocabulary, if I'm being brutally honest. But I think,
And I think you should.
I think what you're getting at, and I'll concede this, that it's clearly not an easy summer read. If you're expecting to take this on a plane or a beach and kind of relax and go, I don't think it's that.
How about a bus?
It's too short of it. No, I don't know. If you're on a long bus, cross country, train, sure, go for it.
Long plane ride.
But personally, I mean, I wrote the book, so I'm not going to say that. But I think there's a lot of fun in it. It's not. It's basically it's not light and fluffy. it's a heavier, more serious book, but I don't think it's complex and difficult. It's not challenging in that way.
Challenging for me.
Okay. Thank you, sir. You're doing well. You want to sit down.
Or at least challenge you in a way to keep you interested.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, it's challenging in that sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So what is your creative process in something like this?
My creative process. Okay, I knew you'd ask that. Okay. I tried to think a lot about this. I don't know what my creative process was. I had to think about it. I guess
Challenging?
it's challenging. It's the polar opposite. I don't know. This is my first published book, but I've written a lot of things that haven't been published yet. So in all of those things, I would say I'm not one of those authors that plans things, which most people say, oh no, that's terrible. I don't outline. Sometimes I don't know how the book is going to end or the story's going to end. I don't sometimes even know what it's going to do chapter to chapter. I really enjoy letting the story take me where it's going, and I follow it, and then I just do a lot of editing. So I would call it restrictive. I mean, if you're a person who does outlining and planning that way, it's wonderful. Don't worry about it. I just, my brain doesn't work that way. I just kind of let it go. And for this particular book especially, I guess I didn't tell the origins of it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell the origins. Way back. No, when I was in college, many years ago, a friend and I used to exchange writing, and I read his stuff, we'd critique, and then sometimes we would write a little bit, and he'd write a little bit. And I started writing a bit of this, not the first chapter you see here. It actually started in a different place, and I wrote the first chapter, and then I just hit a wall completely. I had no idea what to do with it. And I said, here, not him, but my friend. So here, you take it. You finish this. I have no idea what to do with this. No, you're a different friend. Sorry. And he said, no, it's your story. You finish it. Maybe he had no idea what to do with it either. I don't know. So it's one of those then I put in a drawer, or basically I put it in a folder on a computer. And I guess around 2016, 2017, I can't tell you exactly what compelled me, but I guess I was looking through stuff on my computer and went, hey, there's that story. And I started reading it, and all I can tell you is a light bulb went off. I thought, hey, I know what to do with this. And I started writing, and it kept coming and coming. I got ideas. And I've never, as much as I like the flow of things in my process, I've never just continually flowed. This was really different. Normally I had to even take notes on what I was going to write next so I could take a break. I've never had that. This is wonderful. And I was even pleased and amazed what the next idea would be. In fact, when all the storylines converged together, I was amazed by that because I didn't plan that. Now, hopefully, no, not more than hopefully, but when you read the book, you will not see that. In fact, you'll probably say, you must have planned this. But I will tell you honestly, I didn't. But it came together in marvelous ways. And I was very pleased with it. And of course, I did do a lot of editing along the way. But the fundamental idea of the book or the story, that never changed. The fundamental plot lines, they never changed. I had some beta readers, you were one of them, read it, and I rearranged some things, and I edited a lot, but I didn't fundamentally change anything. So you might, again, it's a very big book, so you might think that it's very complex and layered and detailed, and it rambles, and with my process, you might think it kind of spins in 5 million directions. thankfully, thank God, it does not do that at all. I think it's very tight, and it follows. Each plot line follows a very reasonable logic that eventually gets all together. And again, I think it's a lot of fun.
I think that the book is there's a sense of accomplishment when you read this book.
Phew, I got your
Exactly because my publisher made it 500 and something pages.
You know, a science fiction book of 150 pages or 175 pages, but it's a journey, and it's very fulfilling. How did living in England? You lived in England for 10 years.
I did.
Did that affect your writing style?
Did it affect my writing style?
Did it affect your creativity?
Well,
As
if
opposed to
we
living
go
here?
back to the Beatles, it made me use metric system in the book. No. Well, I was an English language teacher over there. Surprisingly, they an American do that.
You were deported.
I thought you were not going to bring that up. Let's see. I guess I'll tell that story.
I don't think
it's not very.
I don't think you should.
You don't
I mean,
think-
I don't think you should not.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I finished my master's and I got a job at a private language school, an international language school where they have international students coming in and out doing international things. I am an international person. So I decided, I don't know how long I was going to be at this job, so that I'm going to go home, visit my family, I'll come back. So I come through Heathrow, and I show them my passport, and I'm telling them, hey, I got a job, I'm going to be working here, and they ask me, well, where's your work permit?
Yeah.
And I looked around, and I said, I don't know. I assume my employer has one for me. And they called the school and they said, whoops, in so many words. And so I had to spend, that was the weekend of Princess Diana's funeral. So I had to spend the night there in this kind of, well, initially it was in this scary cell with all these other people. And then they put me on the next flight home.
Wow.
And then I had to apply for a green card. It took me 3 months, and then eventually got back there. But it took me a while it took me a while to not be angry and think, why didn't an international language school of all places with all the documents and stuff that they deal with all their students not know that I needed this? And the funny thing, since you brought this up, is that I could have told them that I was still a student because my student visa hadn't expired. I could have just said, I'm still a student. But I thought, no, I'm a worker here in England now. So you live, you learn.
It's just fascinating to me that you have such a, and I think maybe it has to do with living abroad or living in England as well as here.
I lived in a lot of places.
Yes, you've traveled the world, but you have a command of the language, and it's appreciated by writers especially.
I hope so.
And it's quite remarkable, actually.
Thank you.
What are you working on now?
Well, I'm working on something completely different. Again, as I think I said earlier, I get bored. I like challenging myself to do different things. So this will explain part of my process, which sounds kind of crazy. I asked a bunch of my friends, if you could be a fictional character in a book, what would you like to be? And I got a whole list of things, and then I just built a story around those characters.
That's pretty cool.
And it's called The Day of Small Things. I might need to change that because there's another book, I think written about the 1930s called The Day of Small Things. So it's like this one day, like what a difference a day makes. Because it's this day with all these crazy, fun. That book, I will say, is like, not only is it opposite in terms of story and approach, but in tone, that's a very light, whimsical, fun read, I hope.
Not challenging, right?
Might be challenging to some people who don't like light fun. Anyway.
Your grandfather was also, but when you
You're bringing up the whole family here.
when you would tell, well, I think it's interesting because it defines who you know, it tells you who you are.
It does tell you.
Your grandfather was an editor.
No, he was
Your father.
my
Your grandfather was the head
grandfather
of the union.
he was the head of the editors union at Universal Studios,
Yes.
and he worked there for I think 40 years in that capacity.
And your mother signed autographs for Sandra Dee.
Well, he got my mom a job when she was like 19 to work for Sandra Dee. So he worked in her that's my mom. Worked in her fan department. I don't know what it's called officially. And she would receive the fan mail, probably read it and respond. But her main job was to sign the autographs for people that asked for Sandra Dee.
Oh no.
On the other funny stories, it's a short story because I don't know all the details. This was about the time where Universal was involved with the creation of Get Smart. So Buck Henry was there and Mel Brooks. And my mom told me that Mel Brooks hit on her.
Okay.
So and I don't know where that went. I'm sure not very far. But that's all I know about that story. I wish I did know more.
Wow.
But that's all I know.
Were
That's
your
all, that's all she's telling.
Your parents were supportive of your writing.
Very much so. Well, again, probably because I was such a wild child. Again, they probably thought, let's channel this somewhere. We need to get him to somewhere positive. So yeah, they very much encouraged me throughout mainly my mom. I mean, my dad was there, but my mom did an awful lot of that. And
Well, shall we read a page? Would you like to hear a page of Randy's book?
is it that time?
Yes.
Randall.
I'm sorry. You know,
Author.
Oh, look.
Author Randall.
It's Randall Bonds.
I could tell a story about that.
You know,
Does that? So we're all adults here.
it's
anyway.
Randall Bonds.
No, not that. You may or may not know that speaking of language and culture, there's
Yes.
differences.
Yes.
The word Randy in England, let's see, the nicest way of putting it is horny, lecherous, like the dog got Randy on his leg. You can say that. And the British were less. Somebody coming in? Oh, Cliff, come on in.
Does he have a dog?
Come on in, Cliff.
Oh, Randy dog.
The Randy dog is outside.
Oh, yeah.
No worries.
Be careful what you say about the British. We have an English.
Oh, I lived there for 10 years. I cannot.
I can take it, Dick.
So you would know, well, when I lived there, I didn't hear a lot of Randy. The Australians, on the other hand, a lot of Randys. So when I was traveling and everyone was, once they found out my name was Randy. So when I lived in England, I was Randall. So a lot of people know me as, I mean, it is my birth name. So everyone knows me as Randall at a certain period of my life. Like people who've known me longer than that know me as Randy. And I don't care what you call me, as long as you don't call me late for whatever they say. But I'm happy with that. But yeah, that's the main reason why it is my birth name and the lecherous part.
I'm so sorry.
What was your question?
I'm so sorry.
You can't get around it. There's
I'm so
Randy
sorry.
Travis. I mean,
That's okay.
you don't think twice when you hear Randy Travis.
No.
Or do you? Okay.
Randall Travis.
I'll let you represent the entire nation.
Randall Travis.
Randall Travis. I think he's a Randolph.
Randolph Travis. Yes.
Anyway,
Well,
I don't know him well. You're gonna read. That's what you're
yes.
gonna do. Okay.
It wasn't there when Caleb Martinex got there, the rustling, crackling. It was deadly still until he sat down. Then, as if it knew he was there, the noise intensified. Caleb tried to keep his eyes set on the north wall, but it was no good. The sound pulled gently at his mind, distracting him. It wouldn't let him relax. The shadow was beginning its creep up the south wall, and he desperately tried to focus in on it. He tried to shut down the buzz around him, but it just became more intense. The noise slowly morphed into a dark, undulating whir and hum. This haunting sound made Caleb tear his eyes from the wall. Not only could he not concentrate, but he also felt it drawing him toward it. It was then that the rustling, crackling morphed again. He now knew why it wouldn't let him go. Bits and pieces of digitized words could be heard through the distortion. It was communicating something. A flicking hologram of a man shot up next to him, mouthing staccato words within the splices of the comm. He wore the uniform of a British soldier during the Battle of Waterloo. Caleb recognized the uniform from history tech pages. Despite the fuzz, he could just about make him out. His wiry, snow-white mustache twisted around his gaping, tooth-filled mouth, and his wild, staring eyes burned with serious angst. His spit-shine boots looked as if they had never been used, and the gold buttons on his tight-fitting red uniform gleamed brightly, though not a single ray of sunlight touched them. The whole thing brought a cheeky grin to Caleb's lips. All was not lost, he thought. Martinix tuned in. The comm was clearly coming to him on some kind of cheap connex. He figured it was someone lost on their first time on a VR jaunt, and they were just stepping out to get some directions. But why here? And why him? There was only one way to find out. He drew himself up and looked at the image face to face. For some reason, Caleb thought good old-fashioned eye contact would help refine the comm link. It was then he noticed the VRT wasn't even looking at it. It was as though he were staring at something beyond him, in the direction of the wall at the dead end of the street. Martinix hadn't remembered anything being there, but he still peered cautiously over his shoulder, just as he'd thought. Nothing. I think that's a great example of the style of this book and how it's written and how it sounds.
Well, that's true. And the words do extrapolate from modern slang.
Yes.
So, but not too far.
Well, I wanted to ground you because it is supposed to be near future,
Right.
and it's still earthbound.
Right.
So I wanted it to be relatable and yet not.
So
So
there have to be some neo words
Yeah.
in there.
yeah.
Do that, sure.
So it's yeah. I didn't reinvent the wheel for this and
Right.
create a whole new. It's just I guess sprinkled throughout the book, so that you get a flavor of this as something different, but still grounding you into something now. Because I like. I guess the science fiction that I like the most to read is something that's earthbound and near future. A lot of people like the outer space stuff, the space operas, they like that, going to another planet, going in a space station. I like that stuff, I do, but I prefer to watch that. So movies, TVs, I love that stuff to watch. But for some reason when I read it, I don't know, it doesn't do as much for me. What did I read? I think most recently I read Blind Spot by Peter Watts. Anybody? No? Okay. Should I still talk about it? Anyway, I'll talk about it. He wrote, he's a biologist, and it's about a team that goes out to find out about this beacon that's out there. And it turns out the beacon has something organic related to it. And then the rest of the book is them trying to find out if it's intelligent or not intelligent, and then how they can relate to it, how it can communicate. It's fascinating, but it's dense and very scientific. And a lot of his biologist background is throughout the book. I finished it. It was hard to read for me. My book is not like that. and then he also had vampires.
That's a 21st century touch.
Yeah, and they weren't like Dracula vampires. They're just vampires that had, I guess, lived during the night. They did have to, yeah, they did have to live on blood. It was, and I guess, well, I shouldn't tell you in case you read the book.
I have one question though.
You have more questions? Okay.
Just this one. When we were talking about you in the book, or your style. I mean, your reflection.
My reflection?
Randall.
Oh, who am I in the book?
It's not Randy.
Randall in the book. Let's see.
Randall in the book?
Is Randall in the book? Sort of, kind of, maybe. This book is not like my personal soapbox. Again, I think it's entertainment, so it's not meant to be didactic. I'm not trying to teach you something. There's no big message in the book. I really don't touch on anything in the cultural zeitgeist. I don't, not that I don't care, but that's not what my book's about. I guess in the early 2000s, I started getting into theoretical physics. I'm not a scientist, but I thought it was fascinating how at the subatomic level, theoretically, there's all this stuff. And this stuff that explains how all things are interconnected, or stuff that we can't see, what explains the dark spots, and I just thought, this is amazing. And hopefully, they were suggesting that we were moving towards actually discovering some of those things for real. But I thought that it's just incredible, and it kind of fills in a lot of the gaps that other sciences can't. Even though, again, it's theoretical. So you can still dismiss it altogether. But I find it fascinating. And so I incorporated that in the book. I was watching a lot of murder mysteries and probably reading some, including older like Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler stuff. And then, I have to include, of course, Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream Electronic Sheep, or Blade Runner, my favorite movie of all time, which is ultimately a murder mystery. And incorporating that kind of concept, again, William Gibson, Jeff Noon, looking at all these things and trying to find a way, how can I put them all together? So, yeah, but those aren't, I guess that's sort of personal, they're my tastes. But things that are me, I guess the only way I can say is what I was talking about earlier, is my love of language. Because I'm a linguist, and I was an English language teacher, so that's my personal touch. That's what makes probably my book, I'll say, different than maybe some others.
Didn't you do the sound for Blade Runner, the documentary on Blade Runner by Joaquin? Did you do that? No?
Well, okay.
I thought you did.
No, there's okay. Does anybody know the name Sid
We
Mead?
just met.
Yes. Well, it's easy to confuse because there's two things. Do you know Sid Mead?
Yeah.
Anybody? Okay, Sid Mead was an illustrator. I don't know when his heyday was, but he was, if you've seen any landscapes that include futuristic vehicles, he probably was the guy that drew those, and I think they're all drawings. He worked for Ford Motor Company and drew all the futuristic cars, or ideas for futuristic cars. He later was recruited to make all the vehicles you see in Blade Runner. He worked on Tron and a lot of other movies in helping them visualize all their vehicles. So a mutual friend of ours, Joaquin, who I've been his main sound designer pretty much from the beginning, he got to meet Sid, and I got to meet Sid. He was a great guy. God rest his soul. He created a little short. That's what it is.
What was that?
Just sort of as a trailer for the movie or the documentary. I did the sound for the short.
Oh.
So that big long story is just for yeah, which is called like 2019, which is the year that Blade Runner is based. It's like 2019 revisited. And Sid is mainly talking about robots in the future and his ideas for about 5 minutes. It's fascinating.
I didn't know there was a documentary on Blade Runner.
Joaquin just got he released it years ago privately, and it was out there for sale. Some people bought it. But it's been recently picked up by a much bigger company, and they are re-releasing it as, this is the documentary, not the little trailer I did. So that's probably what you were thinking of.
It's forthcoming then.
That's coming out very soon. I'll ask him.
Okay.
I can find out if you want to know for sure.
Definitely interesting.
And I think it's called Sid Mead Visual Futurist, which is what he was called because he could create these ideas. And if I can talk about Sid for a little more, he never wanted to just draw a car. He had to draw the car in the landscape. He had people, he had trees, he would have sky. He had to put a whole environment in every one of his pictures. Now I wish I brought, I have a whole book of Sid's stuff. I wish I brought some of those. But if you ever, it's Mead as in the old honey beer, MEAD. Look up his name. There's tons of stuff that he's done. He's brilliant, or was.
Well, it's a great job, Randall. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Questions for
So,
Randall?
questions.
Yeah, I don't know if you chose the longer passage that you read for this reason, but it is an unusually acoustic passage. Much of it describes
Did I do that?
sound and textures of sound. So I thought, well, this is very sound designy.
Yes.
Not knowing the exact title of your PhD, what's the title of your?
It's film history, theory, and practice.
That's an awfully short title.
The actual.
Yeah, the actual title.
Oh gosh, now I gotta try to remember it. I can't remember.
We can do it offline. I'm just curious.
The advancement of films. Okay. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that's cool.
I have a question. How the heck did you end up in Lake of the
Oh, I didn't answer.
That was a
You were
question
supposed
we
to
had.
ask me that.
Yeah.
How did you wind up at Lake in the Woods?
I live in Lake of the Woods. No, I'm not a PMCer, but I live in Lake of the Woods. I've lived there for a year now, and prior to that, I was in Missouri. Let's see. I guess, I might as well just say it. My wife had cancer, and she used to raise horses, and she loved that, and so we wanted to move somewhere where she could have land and a barn and an old house, and I was happy to do anything she wanted at that point. And so she died, and I had no reason to stay in Missouri. But I've always loved the outdoors. I'm not a beach guy. There's people that their idea of paradise is, palm trees, sand. I like pine trees, rocks, streams, moss. Give me more of that. I would eat it up. And so I wanted to live somewhere, since I'm from California. I never talked about that. I'm a valley boy. I was born in Van Nuys, California, the heart of the valley. I won't tell you what else it's heart of now, maybe later. But and I lived there first at least 20 years of my life. Then I did all my traveling and English teaching. But I still have all my friends, one back there too, that live in California that I've known forever. So I wanted to be back where, the people that loved me and cared for me. So I moved back here, but I still wanted to be in the mountains. And a friend of mine, his dad bought it's like a converted trailer with an extension, and it's a 1952 trailer that he had in his. So as his son, as a little boy, he grew up there. He remembered, traveling around this area, and he wanted to pass that on to his sons, but one lives in Oregon, another one lives in Reno, and couldn't convince them to at least live close to here. And he then tried to extend it out to other family, and finally, I guess his wife persuaded him, "You're gonna have to sell it." And he knew I was coming back, and I had been out there many times. I mean, I could also say as a kid, this is pretty much where everyone in Southern California went, to go play in the snow. So I did that as a kid for sure. So I knew the area. I'd been out to visit him many times. So when I got here, I had to think about living here. And I got here and it was really quiet. It's very peaceful, which is one thing that I wanted. My house or place backs right onto the National Forest. So that's my backyard. And that's where the bears come. No, that's the backyard. And I already had a bear in my house. But anyway, that's another story. So
We all know that story up here.
We're very familiar.
Yeah.
So I just said, this is it. And he gave me, I should end it by saying he gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. And that's why I'm here. And it hasn't disappointed me yet. It's really.
So did you buy a house or a trailer, or you got both?
It's a trailer. I bought property.
Okay.
Technically, I bought property. I bought 2 lots, and the trailer and everything on the property was thrown in.
Okay.
So
Some kind of homestead.
and
Blackwood Valley or Lake of the Woods?
it's in Lake of the Woods, and so it's an extension, so it has a whole other area, and then I have 2 sheds. One that's this beautiful wood shed that I could probably live in by myself. And then he left me as we have horseshoe room in the back. He left me the barbecue, left me furniture. It was great. It was and a really good price in Southern California. I own property. I own, so
That's a miracle in itself. Right?
Yeah. So that's why I'm here. And did I answer the first question? I don't know what the
I
first
think that
question
was how you
Did I answer
really
any-
like the woods.
Did I answer your question?
Oh, sure.
Okay. But yeah, the sound design was either, was it explicit? Yeah, probably I'll say yes. I'm sure it just came out of me, and that's sort of why I began the book with a lot of sound.
Right.
And that's why we wanted to read that part too. Yeah, sure.
Ray.
Yes, please.
I read something somebody saying about with all the technology now, we kind of live in science fiction right now.
That's one way of saying it.
And is that kind of what your book projects out? We're still living in the book,
Yes.
they're definitely living in science fiction, but,
Well-
but it's not so different than now.
It's definitely, again, I'm still trying to ground it in things that are tangible, things that are relatable now. But yes, a lot of it is the fiction part, because that's the fun part, that's the imaginative part, where I could play with ideas that are possible. How they investigate the murder is, does it correspond to the way we investigate murders today? Yes. Do all the tools that he's using, are they completely different? Oh, yes. But are the murders themselves completely impossible today? Yes. Is the groundbreaking discovery that the physicists make possible? Yeah, it's possible. I don't know if we're anywhere close to making that discovery, but it's something. I'm trying not to give it away, but it's kind of something that is in the works with theoretical physicists. which is why I'm playing with that idea. And I think you'll recognize a lot of the devices are similar. And I guess I should say there is what I would call not a race or a class. There is a product. It's a product called a synthetic. Does everyone know what a synthetic is? It looks human, but it's perfectly mechanical and is relatively sentient. But I have that element in it. That might be maybe the furthest away from now. I don't know how far we are into AI sentience, but it might be 50 years from now, maybe 100 years from now. I don't think it's thousands of years from now, but we're looking at that. So
I think next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
Sounds about right.
Any other questions?
How far have you delved into AI at all? Because I've gotten really interested in it. I'm using a lot of it.
You mean in my book or in my
real
life?
Like
I'm a reluctant convert, but yes, I have embraced AI very recently. I used ChatGPT to put together I'll be honest, the tagline that I said at the beginning, it didn't generate that one, but I gave it enough information that finally, after maybe about 3 or 4 tries, I was able to put together the tagline from what it gave me.
Right.
It gave me ideas about how to create and how to sell an ebook. And it spat out thousands of things, and then if anybody hasn't used it yet, it then says, well, if you want to know more, if you want more detail about this, you can then specify, and then it will spit out more and more. I can guarantee you, hand on the Bible, I did not use AI at any point in writing this book, and I do have a big problem with that. Coming up with ideas, you can help it, just like if I asked you, what do you think about this, or how would you do this? I don't have a problem with that, but having it write it for you, that I have a big problem with. I used AI to create images on Facebook that I think are really cool, to to explain what Zerty meant, because I did put that on Facebook, or some other things. I created an AI image. I think it's OpenArt AI, if anyone's used that. But that's what I've done. But it's still new to me.
Yeah.
So you have accounts?
I have what?
Accounts.
Yes.
Social media accounts.
I have tons of
They are.
social media.
They are.
You want me to list them all? I'm on pretty much everything. Definitely on X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. What else am I on?
Blue sky.
I've opened an account. I haven't done anything yet, but I'm gonna go there.
We just need to get more people.
Yeah, I'm just tons of Reddit things. I'm in Facebook groups. You may be on the same ones. You might be talking to me. Who knows? But I do a lot of that, which I think is now fortunately or unfortunately, it's kind of the way things are if you self-publish.
Right. You have to be. You have to sell your book.
It's out there.
It's really interesting how I discovered you, because I took the bookstore over. We were supposed to take over January 1st, but we kind of started coming in, and then Bill just said, we kind of took it over a couple weeks early. And there were a bunch of notes behind the counter, and I found a note that said Randall Barnes, local author, wants to do a book launch or an author talk or a book signing. So I Googled Randall Barnes, and it pulled up this best-selling 22-year-old African-American author from Florida. And I'm like, why is this guy wanting to do a book launch? He's already a best-selling author. Why is he wanting to do a book launch in Pine Mountain, Thailand? I'm like, it's not making any sense. So I was like, there's got to be more. And then I completely forgot about it. We got busy with something else, and I'm talking to Greg about it. I'm like, this is not making sense. Who is this Randall Barnes? I don't get it. So then I Googled you again, and I was like, oh, wait a second. There's a dude in Lake of the Woods. I was like, okay, it's gotta be this guy. And so I was like, I hope it's this guy, because he looks really cool. And Greg's like, what do you mean? I'm like, he's like writing noir tech, and he's like into physics and sound design. Like, I hope it's this guy. And I'm like, because I probably couldn't carry on an intelligent conversation with you for more than about 30 seconds.
Oh.
But I will tell you this, I'm a total snob. Like, I pass the books at the grocery store, and I'm like, I would never want, like, the typical American, like, romance novels that you see at the books in the checkout. I'm like,
The mass market.
like, I am not, they will not be entering the door of this bookstore. But I want stuff like the stuff you wrote, which is awesome, and I am so honored to have your book here, and
Thank you.
so honored to have you today. Thank you so much for joining us. This is such an honor. This mountain has produced some talent in so many different arenas, and it's just such an honor to have you here.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming as well. I appreciate it really.